Hello and welcome to Empathy at the Table. Join us in a captivating conversation with human potential expert Steve Tineo. From company restructuring to mastering the nuances of negotiation, with experience in negotiating with world leaders and high-performance athletes, Steve brings an unparalleled insight into ensuring businesses and their teams not only survive but thrive. Dive in to uncover the art and strategy behind effective crisis management and negotiation. Don't miss your chance to learn from one of the best in the field. Steve Tineo, welcome to Empathy at the Table.
Hi, Steve, and welcome to Empathy at the Table. How are you?
Thank you very much, Tony, and welcome to Empathy Around the World.
Thank you. Absolutely. Steve, let's kick straight into this. When I was doing some research for this, I saw a really great podcast that you did. I think you were with someone else, a lady. You started off, and in your podcast you said negotiation is an art. What did you mean by that?
Well, it was my wife, actually. Her name is Sonia.
Oh, is that your wife?
Yes, we did a little TEDx together, and it was about superheroes. Who are the real superheroes? We often think that the superheroes are, this external super people, which I do believe, or we do believe, that the superheroes are the internal super people on small little things. So negotiation is an art, especially if you want to be ethical. That there's a huge misconception with negotiation that it can be used with power. You use force, or the more institutional power you have, the bigger the company, the more strength you're going to have. And we do believe in our world, where we do a lot of conflict resolution and peacemaking. That negotiation has to be about respecting people, about finding the real common emotional stakes of everyone, especially if you take a conflict has to be emotional. If it's not emotional, then it's a disagreement, and it's only rational matters that will cover it. So for us, it's an art, because you have to study yourself and you have to study the other one. If you have something of high stake for you, if I don't match it, even if I sign a short-term contract, I might not nourish that long-term emotional state. So that's where your wonderful word empathy is coming. Empathy comes from empathos, suffering within the other one.
That's
so
right.
If I really want to connect with you, I need to back off a little bit with my own self, maybe with my own ego, and then I need to connect with you. But to connect with you, really to serve your own interests, and then bring my own interest as well. So we learn about each other, and we can serve each other's common emotional interest, which is going to create something of great value over a longer period of time. And that's really why I call it an art, because the more the more you exercise, or the more you experience it, the more you realize that we are students of life. And that the next negotiation might be actually tricky, because there's still that parameter of that unknown person in front of you. And will you be able to connect? Will you be able to, like a martial art, will you be able to really feel where the other person is, or how, the person is going to react? His emotional mood? Is it open for discussion? Will you postpone the meeting? How do you actually with this? And in the high stake negotiation that we do, which is not about the price, it's not the procurement aspect, that human parameter is the most important one, like the preparation of it. So that's where the art is coming, where will you be wise enough to understand the dynamic between all the participants?
Well, Steve, you've come out of the traps running at top speed. There's so many things, so many directions we could take this. There were two things I picked up on that I'd like you to maybe expand on. You said something really interesting, that when you take the emotion out, it's a disagreement.
Yes.
Can you expand? What do you mean when you take the emotion out of a discussion, or of an argument, right? It's a disagreement. What does that mean?
Well, look, it means that let's just take an example. I really like your red sweater. I think it suits you very well. If you're not upset, if I don't touch you emotionally, you're going to tell me, Steve, it's green, and I'm going to say, no, it's red. And then if we don't really find an agreement, then we'll turn out to a rational judge. That can be a person, that can be a AI analyzer of colors and everything, and we look at the result. And if the results say, well, it's green because it's green, there's nothing. Now, if I tell you that, for whatever reason, that, your sweater looks ugly or you look terrible with it, I might actually touch you emotionally. And now it's not about the sweater. It's about your role in this world, and it's about my role in this world. It's about power and domination. I'm going to try to come and for whatever reason, starting to hurt you, starting to minimize you, diminish your power, manipulate you. And then it becomes a very, very toxic process where you're going to be touched. So if you're touched emotionally at that moment, you're going to close down on the rational. The more emotional we are, the less rational. And then it becomes a fight between you and me. And if there's a fight, I can tell you that, well, your sweater is good. Well, no, finally, I think that your sweater is okay, or it suits you well. Then it's too late. I have hurt the part of you where it's going to create that emotion, let's say maybe anger. And then suddenly you have that anger outburst. And if I turn that with a rational thing, someone comes to you and say, no, it suits you very well, you're still going to be angry against me. So now that conflict between you and me, every time you're going to see me, every time that's going to stay because I insulted you. Because emotionally, I created a reaction inside of you, which is painful to some extent because it touched something. And so that cannot be addressed in a rational way. And that's the reason why in mediation, for example, in civil mediation, in divorce, we can see that the entire discussion between the parties, it's so emotional that they're full of anger. So, if the lady is asking or the man is asking for, 1,000 in compensation, even if it matches the rational stuff, it's not enough. And then you see them increasing and wanting more, because what you want is actually, you want to hurt the other. Your ego wants to win. And then if you don't match that, there's a number, I think it was the French mediation chamber that took a panel of 1,000 divorced ladies when they were asking, and it was mainly they did that with the women, but they were asking the custody of the kids, and they were asking for a big part of the money. In 80% of the case, if the husband, who in that case had done something bad, so mainly cheating, would take the responsibility on saying, I am sorry, I take the responsibility of destroying that family, then they would go into reaching an agreement in the mediation, and she would lower down her expectation because it would not be revenge. So let's, in everything I say, it's not a doctrine. I'm just trying to explain things out of context. And some of these numbers or some of the examples could be completely wrong, but let's take it as a wider subject. Now, let me just bring one very, very crazy news that we had lately. When Prigozhin turned against Putin, as dangerous and violent that man was, he was maybe a sociopath, maybe he was a psychopath, it's difficult to say, but suddenly he had this huge emotional outburst. He turned into anger to such a level that when you're emotional, high in emotion, you're low rationally, then he turned the tanks to attack Putin, which is definitely one of the most powerful men in the world. That you like it or not, it's not the case. I don't agree with war, I don't agree with most of these things. It's just the guy completely turned, and then suddenly he wanted revenge against one of the most powerful men in the world, one of the most powerful army. And it's exactly the same. This is not a disagreement. Something triggers inside of you, and suddenly you want to win the argument. You want to hurt the other one. And that's the big difference between a disagreement, where we say that, Tony, remember, the first time we spoke, we had this wonderful round table with a few experts, and we all agree to disagree, even if we don't say it. every time you would say something, or you say that, there's thousands of emotions. And I said, no, I think that there's only a few emotions. And you
Right.
explain me your point, I explain you mine. I didn't want to be right. I didn't want to make you feel that I knew better than you. It was just,
Right.
wow, it's wonderful. You say something, it's different schools, different books, different everything. And that's where you create a small disagreement, which is okay. If I would have said, Tony, what you say has absolutely no value. You come from a bad school, and what you've learned is stupid. What you teach to students are absolutely worthless. Then I would touch you. I would have touched you. And that would have been, I'm pretty sure that your reaction, like my reaction, if you would say the same, I would say, oh, hey, why do you talk to me like this? Who are you to talk to me like this? And
well, it's funny. It's funny you say this, because the whole idea of emotional intelligence, Steve, is recognizing in real time that kind of dynamic. And going even further, so I looked at your profile, and on your TED Talk, you said something really beautiful. I'll just, so that I'll paraphrase it. You said that you learned if you help people when you were younger, you avoided pain. And then you made that a profession. So you made a profession of helping others. What was the cost of this? Because you called this quite toxic.
The cost of this was just a toxic family in my childhood. And I don't want to blame anyone. It taught me a lot, and there's pretty much majority of the population that grows up in very toxic environments. So that was maybe the cost in my young age, and actually the cost was growing up with a lot of fake beliefs, things that I had wrongly learned, and so I was maybe too much fighting for the first years of my life, too much wanting to prove my worth. I worked in Formula One, so I took great pride being surrounded by these people, which was a narcissistic or egoistic trait, because I thought that I would be one of them. All these things were painful, and I had to go very much deep inside of myself to clean it, and I'm still doing it.
So yeah, do you think then, if tying that to what you were saying earlier on, when you come across and you're negotiating with somebody who exhibits these tendencies, do you think, having been through that yourself and having an understanding, does that allow you to understand the other person and at least make some potential assumptions about where their behavior is coming from?
Assumptions, I try not. I try to surround myself with psychologists and psychiatrists, so I can ask the questions. What do you think? In which category they would be, right. Without doing a diagnosis? And so the point which is quite important for me is I've realized my own suffering. So when I see someone dysfunctioning, I try, and it's very, very difficult. My ego is constantly coming and trying to take over that. But I try to always repeat in my mind, what would love do now? Because that person fighting, it's actually someone suffering. So a narcissistic, and that, it's not someone that is so great in his shoes. It's actually the complete opposite. So he's trying to put people lower than actually where his subconscious mind is seeing himself. So when I look at them, I try to see them with a little bit of love and understanding, reminding myself that I used to be one of them. Right. I didn't hurt anybody, or not willingly, small stuff, but I never did anything very bad. But I've hurt people because I didn't know. I didn't know better. I didn't realize better. That brings me maybe not the understanding of the others, but just a little bit of humility to actually accept that their dysfunction today was my dysfunction yesterday. And maybe some people, you can look at me if you've done maybe a deeper personal work, and you can say, well, Steve still has some dysfunction. And then you would, if you kind enough or wise enough, you would forgive me that, or maybe trying to show me a way. And that's what I try to do in a positive way, because I think that if we don't need to save the world, Tony. Yeah. The world will go on its own. There was already 5 extinctions. We need to save the human race and the impact of what the human race is doing to the other species. And that's what we have to save. And I actually do believe that by bringing consciousness to people, but real consciousness, and first bringing that consciousness to myself with humility, is actually one great way of changing the global mindset.
Yeah, we're aligned on this, Steve. And you're also, you are a complex negotiating expert. You're a financial entrepreneur, and you call yourself a peacemaker. And I really like that. But the bulk of the work you do is in the corporate sector, working with companies. Tell me how you combine the two. How does, when you walk into, a fast-paced corporate company, and you have this message of being able to bring empathy, use emotional intelligence in their interactions, what kind of reactions do you get in your sector?
Right. Let's be absolutely honest, Tony, between us. It is not easy. I have a lot of door closed. I felt a lot rejected because when you bring the word emotions into business, they want to exclude you.
Yeah.
They say, no, but business is business. Politics is the same. It's all about politics.
Yeah.
So I would say that the cost of acquisition of work is actually very high. And I've spoken to a lot of people that have the same will, people like you actually, talking about empathy and all of this. And they kind of feel the same. It's growing, but it's still just come for 1 hour conference and then please leave. Don't infect our employees with all this empathy stuff. We're here to make money. That's the first very, very difficult thing. Now, the second thing, which is very important, I'm sure, Tony, you have the same. Behind every, let's say, very closed individual, some people that are really showing that I don't know if you say it in English, carapace, it's like what the turtle has, the shell. They are very wounded and very sensitive people. So I was very surprised during my career, even with a few politicians, that when the door is closed, they would actually open up. They would have tears in their eyes, and they would actually ask for help, saying, I can't deal with this anymore. It's too much. Everybody sees me as Mr. This and that, and I cannot show my weaknesses, because in politics or in business, people would, they would fight you back, or they would challenge your position, and they're suffering. Yeah. So that's the second thing. The third, it's my own personal commitment. Choice. I have a conference which is called "Peace is a Personal Choice." First, you have to make peace with yourself. Then you make peace with your environment, and then you can open up to have greater objectives or wishes. Of course, we want to make peace. We want to make peace in Ukraine, but most of the people that are actually judging what's happening in Ukraine and the peacemaking, they actually cannot even make peace with their own environment. And we toxic with some of our friends, some of our colleagues. Sometimes we bullying, not because we want it, because we're busy, because we missed our plane, because we're angry, and we start changing our behaviors. That's the very first thing to change. And then people always, when I give classes, people ask me, how can I become a big negotiator? And I really don't consider myself anything big or that I achieved anything. To the contrary, I always tell them, just find a conflict in your building between the janitor and the lady or the Mr. something in the second floor and handle it. If you don't know how to handle these kind of small things, you cannot handle the big things. The dynamic is going to change, but the conflict is the same. It's a human being in a conflict with another one. And the Prigozhin thing, it's exactly the same. Whatever level, sometimes someone is imploding and is going to do something completely stupid. Without going into the conflict in the Middle East these days, but when you look at the dynamic between the parties, was there really a will for peace for the last at least 14 years? Was it really an effort to we talk about inclusion, exclusion? I remember speaking with one of the great negotiator in Geneva, which is a friend of mine. He was the head of the multilateral diplomacy for the European Union. And he was the one discussing with the Taliban. And he met with the actual president of the Taliban a few times I think it was in an embassy in Lahore. And the guy said, help us be at the table. And the European Union, the guy even told me I could not even pay for the tea because otherwise I would finance terrorism. And the thing is, you radicalize them, you don't put them around any table, which I know is very difficult. But if you don't put the enemy around the table, even if they're extremist, you have no chance to maybe instill a little bit of peace or, plant a few seeds of whatever. Then you radicalize them. And one day, what do? They explode. And so I'm not blaming anybody. I'm just trying to say it's the same dynamic in our companies.
Yeah, we see this in companies. We see this the silos being built, right? And
yes.
And just amongst teams, departments, companies, and individuals, and then cultures within cultures. And you said something that strikes a nerve with me, which is this idea of bringing emotional intelligence into the workplace, encouraging people and giving them a framework to have these difficult conversations is often seen by top level management as it's a nice to have, it's nice to hear, but at the end of the day, Q4 is just around the corner and we need to bang on and get sales. But I'm encouraged because I'm seeing a narrative change, and after COVID, I think we saw a lot of people actually on the screen with their bosses and talking and really getting to know who these people are. And I think that was a shift. And so now people are kind of back in the office and they're having different levels of conversation. And what I'm finding, and I'll ask you whether you find the same thing, is a lot of the leaders now are realizing that if I'm really looking to scale up my business or scale up my team, I need to scale myself up first. There's work that needs to be done on excavating myself as a leader before I can really start to build my team. And that requires emotional intelligence. It requires empathy, all the skills that people think were soft. And now suddenly people realize they're actually very hard. And that's a shift that I'm encouraged by. Are you seeing anything similar?
Absolutely, Tony. And there's actually, to a certain extreme, I really like the American way, and they know how to do these shows and these things better than anybody. And you can see how many videos, new coaches, new whatever, how spiritual, how everything. It might be a little bit too turned around, make $1 billion, be $1 billion company and everything, but at least it's pushing in a direction of self-questioning and improving. Now, the second thing is, just imagine how much the world has changed in 20 years. And it seems to be exponential. What people that have discovered a little bit of that emotional intelligence or using empathy or happiness at the workplace, all of this, the real well-being, we see actually the results. Yeah. So it might take another 10 or 20 years, but you and me would not stop it because it's not working. We see the result in the companies where we work when we act as I call that an executive director. I sit in the middle of the people and I just create groups and I change the dynamic within people. And it's amazing how it works. Yeah. And so even if people would show me the door, I would not stop it. Yeah. First, because I see it works. Second, because it's the right thing to do. And maybe it will not work, but I think it's the right thing to do in our environment. And the third is just we are emotional beings. And this is backed by science. Medical science cannot prove that we don't have emotions. And emotions, they have a life. So, and we see it. We see in conflict resolution how, when we address the emotional stake of a conflict, the number of successes we have in our company. And, it's always difficult to give a number, but we have 80% success rates in conflict resolution because of that approach. I see some of my lawyers' friends, which are very rational, they say maybe we have 30% and it's not a resolution. When you go to the judge and the judge imposes you to have shared custody or to have no custody, this is not a resolution. This is the legal, machine that is crushing people. And I think there's a lot of, we see in the UK, we see in Switzerland, where now mediation is becoming mandatory. There's a lot of things that are not going to the judge.
You say mediation is becoming mandatory in what type of situations?
Well, in civil cases, or especially in divorce, now in Switzerland, it's still a little bit restrictive because I think it's 3 times 1 hour with a mediator and then it's legally binding. So sometimes you need a little more than 3 times 1 hour, especially if the people are really wounded,
Right.
and they're not followed by I don't know, a therapist or someone where they could really look, a divorce and separation, being away from your kids, it creates a lot of pressure. So that's the only thing. You might need sometimes a little more, but it's very great. I think in the UK they have the same now. When you have to go to a divorce, they bring you to the mediators first, and that's very, very positive. And they see that it has actually changed the dynamic of divorce over the last 10 years. That I don't know, I cannot give the number, but a great percentage of cases are not resolved through mediation. So I would not be surprised if it would be higher than half. That becomes a majority, but that's something we could check.
Yeah. And you mentioned on previous conversations your passion for the power of human capital. When you talk about that, tell us what that means to you.
So much, almost everything. It's just that let me give you one number. Harvard, Carnegie, and Stanford came out with a joint study where they say that success, and let's not talk about success, but it was a matter of a lot of things, happiness being one of the most important, was so the lowest was 8% aptitude, the knowledge, and 92% attitude. 15% was the Harvard number. So 15% of Tony's success is the aptitude. And then 85% is the attitude. But look at, there's an amazing video that you can watch from, what's his name? I forgot his name. It talks about trust, performance, and trust. The gentleman who did this video on why.
Simon Sinek.
Simon Sinek. And he actually talks that he went to this the SEAL team, and he asked the head of the SEAL team 6 and saying, how do you pick up that guy? And he really drew one line saying that's performance and that's trust. And the guy, they choose a lower performer, higher trust to be in that team. It's relative. They're not super low performance. And that he says in the video that in our in the business world, we do the exact opposite. We actually bonus the high performance, low trust, which is a toxic leader in a toxic team, and destroy the game in the long run. So if I want to know more about Tony, well, I need to go in the attitude. When I did some work with Formula One drivers in mental preparation, I would not train them how to drive. That's the 15%. We would train them on everything else. This holistic approach of well-being and anger. If you lose a championship, or if you insulted in the press, or if your girlfriend is cheating on you just before an important race, how do you feel? And they're very important things. So human capital, if I want the best out of Tony, I'm not going to just check at your resume and see what you've learned. What you've learned and what you've experienced are two absolutely different things. And I've decided, because there's a lot of especially in our little brain, which is there in our little brain academy, which is the empowerment of people, we don't really teach negotiation because there's a lot of wonderful negotiation classes there. What we do is hey, when you're a negotiator, what kind of negotiator you want to be? And we go into all these different subjects, and that empathy is one of them. Spirituality, psychology, resilience, values, principles. They're all very great. I resigned from I was in the board of a big financial company a while ago, and I helped them out of a big conflict. And I realized that when we won, that they had continued doing that operation. And I went to the CEO and I said, but how come you didn't stop? And he said, but it's very profitable. If I know that if you take us out once, you're going to do it again. And I wrote that letter when I resigned saying that some people are so poor that the only thing they have is money. Money is great, but come on, we're at the point where changes are needed. The world is changing. and a lot of people are dying, and there's going to be a lot of even more catastrophic. So when do we start acting on our behalf, saying, I decide to be a man of value and principle, and you can still have an abundant life? It doesn't mean that, you need to be poor and you need to not at all. To the opposite. Be abundant to everything, but be abundant of love, be abundant of recognition, be abundant of friends, and be abundant of money as well.
Steve, we're coming to the end. I mean, you're the type of guy that I would love to sit in a bar and have a couple of glasses of wine and have these type of conversations.
I'll come to Barcelona to see you with great pleasure.
You have a deal.
We'll do that.
Just before we end, Steve, how can our listeners find you? What is it, that's your real passion project at the moment that maybe anyone listening might be interested in knowing?
Right. I'm really not active in social media. I've always worked a little bit in the shade, and I'm going to try to keep it that way. So there's one book that I've wrote with my wife, Sonia. It's called Through the Self. It's actually an holistic approach to bring you back to yourself, because we have a lot of people suffering, or a lot of people realizing that they're not really in the right life. And that's all the work we did over the last 25 years in negotiation, but not only, in mental preparation. And, there's a lot of bit of therapy, there's a lot of bit of psychology, but it's each subject of really 2 pages, and they bring you back to a door. The question, Tony, if you ask me, for example, what is the best negotiation class? I would ask you, what is your profile? Because you can do that or you can do that. And It's pretty much the same. When we sit down with people and they feel not comfortable with themselves, it's really showing them different options and let them choose. If someone is suffering, you can offer a psychologist, you can offer a psychiatrist, you can offer medication, you can offer a therapist, you can offer, and they have to choose. Say, oh, that talks to me more than anything else. So that's how we've actually done that holistic approach. The second thing is, people can always find me on LinkedIn and write to me. I normally answer most of the messages. And I will be teaching in a few universities in Ukraine and in Holland. And we are going to launch a few programs for negotiation, but mainly conflict resolution and mainly peacemaking. And a huge part, which the methodology I've created, is called KYF, Know Yourself First, to promote that actually way of getting to know yourself, not to become a better negotiator, but to become a better whatever you want to be, negotiation and mediation as well. So if people want, my name is Steve Alban Tineo, and I'm on LinkedIn. I don't have any of the others. I try to be a little too concentrated. Maybe I'm too old school. I'm not that young anymore. But I'll be very happy to interact with people.
Thank you very much. Steve Alban Tineo, thank you for joining us at the table. It's been a pleasure.
And thank you, Tony, for having me. Thank you. And thank you for everything. Congratulations for everything you are doing as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Steve, for joining us today on Empathy at the Table. We've gained a deeper understanding of the complexities and the opportunities that exist in human potential working in teams. A heartfelt thank you to you, Steve. To our valued listeners, if you found this episode enlightening, please show your support by liking and subscribing to our podcast. Your engagement helps us bring more content like this to you. And don't forget to check the links below, where you will find all of the details on how to connect with Steve. My name is Tony Anagor, and this is Empathy at the Table.